Welcome to Amish Shakti 5858 War and Love Reports. I am Amit Goodman. Now a weather report by Alex Wallace of Weather Channel.
The focus is on Hurricane Hillary and its impact it's going to have on parts of the West Coast, particularly Southern California. Getting the very latest here when it comes to this hurricane, 110 mile per hour Category 2 hurricane. So we have seen it weaken a bit from its height at a Category 4 hurricane at one point. But that wasn't expected for it to weaken as it moved northbound. That does not mean the impacts will not be real and certainly significant here for us. First to Baja and then getting into Southern California. And it's going to come with some gusty winds at the very least and a lot of rain. There's a ton of moisture associated with the system, and that's going to have an impact on us. How about the tropical storm warnings that are up? So anticipating tropical storm conditions here in Southern Cal. LA under a tropical storm warning. This is just not something that happens out there for us. So we'll watch it move northbound as we work our way on through our Sunday. Really seeing conditions going downhill with some heavy rain, eventually moving its way northbound. But the rain could add up, and flash flooding is a big time risk.
Let's watch raging wildfire in Washington State and in Canada, Northwest Territories, especially in Yellowknife, the capital city of Northwest Territories, and violence in the Ecuador during the election campaign, which is going to be held on, I guess, in the last of this month.
And around 30,000 people are ordered to flee. This includes Yellowknife, the capital of Canada's Northwest Territories, where most of the town has been evacuated as the flames close in. The governor of Hawaii,
wearing bulletproof vests and surrounded by armed national police, Ecuador's presidential hopefuls closed out their campaigns just days after the August 9th killing of candidate Fernando Villavicencio. Gunned down while leading a campaign rally, the former journalist was outspoken about the links between organized crime and government officials. Did that cost him his life?
Certainly, and one of the most notorious and prescient things that he said, he always said it, is that it would cost him his life.
Professor Eduardo Gamara is an expert on Latin America. He says Ecuador, long known as one of the most peaceful nations in South America, has become more violent, dangerous, and deadly, similar to Colombia during the height of the drug wars, where journalists, judges, and even a presidential candidate, Luis Carlos Galan, were murdered.
In Ecuador, what you have is this enormous presence of transnational organized crime. For such a small country to have such a concentration, because it's so small, it may even be worse.
On August 14th, another politician was assassinated in Ecuador. That means there have been 3 high-profile political-related killings in less than 4 weeks. Emilio Palacio is an exiled Ecuadorian journalist living in Miami. Villavicencio was his friend.
No sé si eran muchos.
It wasn't that he had a lot of enemies, he told me. It's that they were powerful. Journalist has been named as Villavicencio's replacement. He faces off against 7 other hopefuls, among them Luisa Gonzalez, considered the frontrunner prior to the killing. Security is now the #1 concern for Ecuadorians heading to the polls.
You think there's still hope for Ecuador? Yo estoy convencido.
I'm convinced of it, he told me. Christian Benavides, CBS News, Miami.
A report of missile attack on Ukraine by Deborah Patton of CBS.
In the heart of Chernihiv. The weekend peace shattered in an instant, and the exact moment our CBS News team was driving towards the city center. This is the very building we were heading for just minutes before we arrived. It was hit by a massive explosion. In the line of fire, the city's landmark theatre, a university block, and the central square, where families take their children to play, and on this particular day was filled with people on their way to church to mark an Orthodox religious festival, a day of celebration turned into one of horror and loss, and a terrifying end to the summer holidays for passengers returning home from their vacation on this bus. I saw sparks, fire, and we started to fall. The glass shattered, Lydia said. Everyone was screaming. On a nearby sidewalk, emergency workers treated the wounded, but for this young woman, it was too late. Among the dead, a 6-year-old child and over a dozen more children injured. First responders rushing to the scene were shocked.
We try to save lives. It's bad because many people died very fast bleeding.
Red Cross worker Andriy Yashchenko told us it took everyone by surprise, as this city has been spared the worst of the war for much of this year. But today, the crunch of glass and the mangled debris strewn across the main square was a brutal reminder that nowhere is safe. The United Nations says it is extremely disturbed by this attack, describing it as heinous.
These are some of the today's headlines. There is an outrage in Miami after the death of a famed killer whale. Lolita, the orca, was kept in the Miami Sea Aquarium for 50 years and was set to be freed soon. Reporter of NBC says that tonight, outside the Miami Sea Aquarium, people will voice their anger after the death of beloved orca Lolita. Her miserable existence finally over. The park's doors closed today following Lolita's death on Friday. Grief taking many forms as she was taken from the sea aquarium for final time. Protesters demand to know why it did not happen sooner while she was still alive. One protester said,
"We're all absolutely devastated that she was so close to finally having some semblance of a natural life."
The 57-year-old orca had spent all but 4 years of her life right here. She was the Miami Seaquarium star. For decades, her presence sparked joy.
Fabulous. To say the least, it was fabulous.
And fury.
All absolutely devastated that she was so close to finally having some semblance of a natural life.
The 57-year-old orca had spent all but 4 years of her life right here. She was the Miami Seaquarium star. For decades, her presence sparked joy.
Fabulous. To say the least, it was fabulous.
And fury. She'd been living there since 1970, but before she was Lolita, she was known as Tokite, prior to her capture from the waters of Washington state at 4 years old. Earlier this year, activists were delighted. This aquarium had agreed she'd be released within 2 years to a netted sanctuary in her native waters. Just this week, an update that delivered hope.
Toki being retired has only been a short amount of time now. She is better than ever right now, and she is way more active than she has been in the past.
But days later, a new update delivered heartbreak. This aquarium saying after serious signs of discomfort, despite receiving the best possible medical care, Lolita died from a suspected renal condition.
PETA called this aquarium tank she lived and died in, quote, the smallest, bleakest orca tank in the world. This aquarium did not respond to NBC's request for comment.
We're feeling a lot of pain and sorrow for Lolita right now.
The ones who pressed for her release that she never lived to see, heartbroken.
What do we know about other animals held in aquarium with Lolita?
So the original plan was to have dolphins join Lolita to their new home in the sanctuary, but obviously with her passing, activists are pushing for that plan to stay the same for those dolphins. We haven't heard back yet from the aquarium on what those new plans will be.
A major train derailment in Oklahoma. Take a look at this dash camera video in a town of Moore. We can see on the left hand side the car began to topple over. From above you can see the extent of the accident. 22 cars went off the rails. Officials said the cargo was not a threat to the surrounding community. Police confirmed a mechanical issue was the cause of the derailment. Nobody was injured. Now a shocking video out of Denver. A United Airlines pilot reaching his breaking point while waiting at a parking lot. He apparently got so frustrated he used an axe to chop down the gate. It's hard to look away. An ex-welding airline pilot waging war on a parking lot gate. Cameras capturing the bizarre movement at Denver International Airport when United Airlines pilot Kenneth Jones, still in uniform, hacks away at the gate. Over and over again, more than 20 times. The pilot told police that multiple cars were backing up behind the gate. That's when he decided to get the axe he already had in his car and solve the problem himself. He told police he had, quote, hit his breaking point when a parking lot. Tonight, Southern California and Mexico's Baja Peninsula are already feeling the effects of Hurricane Hillary hours before its landfall. In the desert east of Angeles, what is expected to be 3 days of rain has begun. Forecaster says a year's rain could fall in a matter of hours, leading to catastrophic and life-threatening flash floods. Hurricane Hillary, now a tropical storm by the tenant, fall as early as tonight in the Baja Peninsula, and then forecasters say it will surge north as the first storm to hit Southern California in 84 years. High winds and heavy rains are expected from the Pacific coast to southern Nevada and central Arizona. Residents are preparing. In Newport Beach, they stocked up on sandbags and San Clemente. Workers put down parts to prevent mudslides. More natural disasters. Wildfires are affecting the US and Canada. In Maui, the death toll from the deadliest wildfire in modern history stands at 114. More than 900 are reported missing. In Canada, Yellowknife, the capital of Northwest Territories, is a virtual ghost town after 20,000 residents were ordered to leave as a large, out-of-control wildfire threatens the city. British Columbia is under a state of emergency and several fires out of control. 15,000 evacuated and 20,000 more under evacuation alerts. A Russian missile strike in the northern Ukraine city killed at least 70 and injured more than 100. 12 children. Officials say a theater and university were hit. Zelensky condemned the attack while visiting Sweden. He is asking for fighter jets from Sweden, which is in the process of joining NATO. The head of Maui's emergency agency resigned earlier this week amid criticism of his decision not to activate warning sirens during the deadly, fast-moving wildfire. He said he was quitting for health reasons. The fire and the high death toll put a spotlight on how communities respond to emergencies, both natural and man-made. Let's watch a discussion between Trisha Vashendrav, Director of Disaster Management at University of Delaware, and John Yon of PBS NewsHour. Trisha, how significant was having a factor was that decision not to use the sirens in the high death toll?
That resulted.
I want to start out by saying, of course, how tragic this event is, and I think all of our hearts just go out to not only the survivors of this just devastating disaster, but also the emergency responders. One of the things that we know very clearly from decades of research on disasters is that there is a sequence of behaviors that people need to go through before they even begin to start reacting to a disaster. They have to, or to a warning. They have to hear it, they have to understand it, they have to believe it, they have to personalize it. So is this actually me that one is talking about? And they have to confirm it. And that could be with people in their household, it could be calling up a friend or a family member, it could be checking on the internet and trying to find out, is this something that I need to do some action, protective action toward? So anything that can speed up that decision making to get them to that point, be it using different ways to reach people through cell phones, through the media, through sirens, through other kinds of warning mechanisms, gets people just a little bit more closer to be able to start that very time-consuming step of actually evacuating or taking protective action.
Well, in the Southwest now, they've got a tropical storm. It's currently a hurricane, Hillary, bearing down on them. They're already warning about potentially catastrophic and deadly flash flooding over the next 36 hours or so. Flash flooding is something that by definition comes on very quickly. What's the best way to warn people about that?
The more advanced notice that you can give people to be on guard, to be ready for an evacuation, the better. The fact that it takes some people much more time to get to that point, they may have a mobility issue. They may not be able to get out of an area because they don't have transportation. So having that advance warning gets people thinking, they get people talking about this to each other, and then when there is a warning that comes through, they're much more close to the point of actually reacting. Those seconds, those minutes really count.
Tricia, the Mount County Emergency Manager said that the reason he did not sound the sirens is because they were intended, he said, for tsunamis. He did not want people rushing inland toward the fire. Trisha, what do you make of that explanation? Can emergency responders afford to have a one alert system for one particular event?
There's a few things at play there. One, there's sometimes a misconception that people will panic during a disaster, that there will be widespread panic that takes place that's not backed up by the data unless there is a window of opportunity for escape that's quickly closing. It's actually more difficult to get people to move, to start taking action. That's why those extra minutes and hours count so much. It will be really important to look at the plans that are in place for that part of Maui, whether or not community residents believe that those sirens are something that should be used for all different types of hazards, whether or not there was a failure to activate them, and they should have been, whether or not there were repairs that needed to be done. So I think part of the real investigation that will happen is the extent to which how much this was decision making and how much it was a lack of planning or different types of planning that didn't take into account the severity or the quick onset of this particular fire.
If you were designing a warning system from scratch, someplace that has never had one before, and they called and asked you to do it, what would it look like?
It would first of all involve the input of that community and understanding the very different types of community members that are in place. You can't design a warning system for a community. It really has to be with them. It might be fine for an official to say that this is what we use particular warning mechanisms for, but if the community has a different understanding of that warning system isn't going to be effective. There are residents in this community. There are people who've lived there for a long time, for a short time. There are tourists who are in the area, people who commute back and forth. All of those will have a different response and understanding to those warning strategies. And we also know that we have to use a multi-pronged approach. So it can't just be sirens, it can't just be cell phone or media. Different kinds of channels of communication reach people in different ways. People trust different sources of information. All of that needs to be taken into account, not simply when that hazard is threatening people immediately, but thinking about those plans years in advance.
You mentioned trust. I suspect some people in Maui may have lost trust in the government emergency response. How do they rebuild that?
The recovery process is extremely challenging at the best of times. This community has a long road ahead, unfortunately, in thinking about the amount of paperwork that's involved, the claims that have to be filed, trying to make sense of the financial and the community aspects. When you add that element of blame and mistrust, it can be a real challenge, and they really will need our support in moving forward.
Trisha Delaware, thank you very much. University of Delaware. Thank you for watching and privilege of your time. This is Amish Shakil 5858. I am Amir Budna.